Money doesn't change people, Billionaire CEO Ethan Callaway said as he placed 4 black credit cards across the marble table. It exposes who they really are. The rooftop restaurant overlooking Manhattan went silent so fast, even the jazz music suddenly felt too loud. Crystal glasses froze halfway to people's lips. Phones came out instantly. Everyone knew Ethan Callaway, the youngest billionaire on Wall Street. The man who bought companies the way normal people ordered coffee. And tonight, under gold lights and a 70-story skyline, he looked entertained. Dangerous kind of entertained. For cards, he continued calmly, leaning back into his tailored charcoal suit. No spending limit. 1 choice each. A few guests laughed nervously. Others leaned closer. They thought it was another billionaire stunt. Another viral moment from a man rich enough to turn humiliation into entertainment. Ethan scanned the restaurant like a king choosing players for a game. You. He pointed toward a blonde social media influencer wearing a silver designer dress. Her eyes widened instantly. Me? Congratulations, Ethan replied. Tell me what you'd buy. Easy, she laughed. A Lamborghini Aventador. The crowd cheered. Ethan handed her the first card without emotion. Then came a real estate model near the Champagne Tower. A penthouse in Miami Beach, she answered immediately. More applause. Third was a luxury travel blogger sitting near the window. Private jet access for a year. Ethan smirked while sliding her the third card. Predictable, he murmured quietly. Then his eyes landed somewhere unexpected. Naomi Brooks stood near the service station, holding a tray of sparkling water. Black waitress uniform. Hair tied neatly behind her head. Tired eyes. Calm face. One customer laughed under his breath. Come on, Ethan. She's staff. Another man grinned. She probably never touched a card with a limit over $5,000. A few people chuckled. Naomi heard all of it. But she didn't react. That caught Ethan's attention more than anything else. You, he said firmly. Come here. The rooftop lights reflected across the final black card as he pushed it slowly toward her. 1 purchase, he said. Anything in the world. Naomi stared at the card for several seconds. Not excited. Not nervous. Just thinking. Then she quietly asked, Can this pay someone's ICU bill tonight? The laughter disappeared instantly. Ethan blinked once. Whose bill? Naomi tightened her grip around the tray. A 6-year-old girl downstairs at St. Vincent's Hospital. The billionaire's smile slowly faded. Because for the first time that night, someone had answered without thinking about themselves. The rooftop stayed silent long after Naomi spoke. Even the servers near the kitchen entrance had stopped moving. Ethan Callaway stared at her like he was waiting for a punchline that never came. An ICU bill, he repeated slowly. Naomi nodded once. Her name is Lily Ramirez. She is 6 years old. One of the women at the table scoffed loudly. This is exactly why rich people do not trust strangers. Another guest laughed under his breath. She saw a billionaire and invented a sick child. Naomi did not react to either of them. She simply held the tray against her chest and stood there calmly while hundreds of expensive lights reflected across the Manhattan skyline behind her. Ethan noticed something strange then. She was not trying to impress him. She was not nervous. She was not performing. She looked tired. The kind of tired money could not fake. Ethan slowly reached for his phone. Daniel, he said quietly to his assistant, verify the story. The assistant disappeared immediately toward the elevators. Around the rooftop, whispers spread like smoke. Phones recorded everything now. People loved watching powerful men judge ordinary people. But they loved watching ordinary people fail even more. Ethan leaned back in his chair and studied Naomi carefully. You are telling me, he said, that with unlimited money sitting in front of you, you would spend it on someone else's child? Naomi finally looked him directly in the eyes. I already know what it feels like to go without, she answered softly. A little girl in a hospital bed should not have to learn that at 6 years old. Something about the way she said it made the table uncomfortable. The influencer with the Lamborghini card suddenly looked embarrassed. A cold wind swept across the rooftop, rattling candle flames inside crystal holders. Ethan glanced around the restaurant. Everywhere he looked, people were avoiding eye contact now. The energy had changed. 10 minutes earlier this had felt like entertainment. Now it felt like exposure. Then the elevator doors opened again. Daniel stepped out quickly, breathing hard. His face had gone pale. He walked directly to Ethan and lowered his voice. Sir, the child is real. Intensive care on the ninth floor at St. Vincent's. Mother is behind on rent. The hospital account is overdue by $87,000. The table went completely still. Ethan blinked once. Naomi quietly turned to leave, ready to continue serving drinks like nothing had happened. But before she could take another step, Daniel leaned closer to Ethan again and whispered something else. Something that made the billionaire's entire expression change. Because the little girl in the hospital was not the only secret Naomi Brooks had been hiding. Daniel's whisper hit Ethan harder than the freezing wind rolling across the rooftop. "Sir," he said carefully, "Naomi Brooks has been making anonymous payments to that family for 7 months." Ethan frowned immediately. "How much?" "Almost $40,000 total." Ethan stared at him in disbelief. "She is a waitress." "Yes, sir." Around them, wealthy guests were still pretending not to listen while secretly recording every second on their phones. Naomi had already returned to serving drinks near the far side of the rooftop, moving quietly between tables like none of this involved her. Ethan watched her carefully now. Everything about her suddenly felt different. The way she avoided attention. The way she never defended herself when people laughed. The way she spoke without trying to impress anyone. It unsettled him. One of the influencers broke the silence first. "There is no way a waitress can afford $40,000. Another guest nodded quickly. "She is probably lying about the donations, too." Ethan turned toward Daniel again. "Did you confirm the payments?" "Every one of them," Daniel answered. "Cashier checks, anonymous transfers, even hospital parking receipts." Ethan slowly looked back at Naomi. The rooftop no longer felt entertaining. It felt uncomfortable, like someone had turned on lights in a room full of people pretending to be better than they really were. Ethan stood up from the table. The movement alone silenced the room again. He walked across the rooftop floor toward Naomi while expensive shoes clicked softly behind him. Several people lifted their phones higher. They expected humiliation. They expected drama. Rich people rarely approached poor people publicly unless it was for attention. But when Ethan stopped in front of Naomi, his voice was quieter than before. "Why would you spend that kind of money on strangers?" Naomi carefully placed 2 glasses onto a nearby table before answering. "Because nobody helped my mother when we needed it." Ethan said nothing. Naomi kept her eyes lowered. She worked 3 jobs until her body gave out. After she died, people sent flowers. Her jaw tightened slightly. Flowers do not save anyone. For the first time all night, Ethan had no response ready. The billionaire who could dominate boardrooms full of investors suddenly felt small standing beside a woman wearing a restaurant apron. Then one of the guests shouted loudly from behind them. "If she cares so much about helping people, why is she still working here?" Some people laughed again. Naomi finally looked up. Her eyes stayed calm, but something deeper sat behind them now. "Because kindness does not pay New York rent," she answered softly. The laughter died instantly. Ethan glanced toward Daniel again, but his assistant already looked shaken. "Sir," Daniel whispered carefully, "there is one more thing you should know about Naomi Brooks." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" Daniel hesitated. "She turned down a job offer from your company 2 years ago. A 6-figure salary." The rooftop suddenly felt colder after Daniel revealed the truth. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. "She turned down a position at my company?" Daniel nodded carefully. 2 years ago. Senior Financial Analyst Division. Starting salary was $180,000 a year plus bonuses. Ethan looked back toward Naomi instantly. She was quietly wiping down a nearby table while wealthy strangers whispered about her like she could not hear them. Why would anyone reject that offer? Ethan asked. Daniel hesitated. "There is more, sir." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Say it." "She scored higher on the aptitude assessment than 98% of your executive recruits." The billionaire said nothing. For the first time in years, Ethan Callaway felt genuinely confused. His entire career had been built on understanding people, predicting them, controlling outcomes before they happened. But Naomi Brooks made no sense to him at all. One of the influencers nearby overheard part of the conversation and laughed awkwardly. "Wait, you are saying the waitress is secretly some genius now?" Another woman crossed her arms. "That sounds fake." Daniel calmly pulled a file up on his tablet and handed it to Ethan. Naomi Brooks, Columbia University graduate, economics and statistical analysis. Internship offers from 3 major firms. Ethan's eyes narrowed slowly. Then why is she working here? Daniel lowered his voice. She withdrew from corporate recruiting after her mother died. Ethan looked across the rooftop again. Naomi moved between tables carrying glasses while Manhattan glittered behind her like another universe entirely. She did not look bitter. She did not look defeated. Somehow that bothered him even more. Most people who lost opportunities carried anger. Naomi carried dignity. Ethan walked toward her again, ignoring the cameras now following every movement. "You lied to my company," he said quietly. Naomi stopped. "No," she answered calmly. "I changed my mind. About a career most people would kill for." Naomi looked out toward the city lights for a moment before answering. "My mother got sick during my final semester." Her voice stayed steady, but softer now. "Cancer treatment drained everything we had in less than a year." Ethan remained silent. "By the time your offer arrived, I was already working double shifts to keep our apartment." She gave a faint smile without humor. Wall Street stopped matching after that. Around them, the rooftop had gone completely still again. Wealthy guests who spent thousands on dinner every weekend suddenly looked uncomfortable hearing a waitress speak with more honesty than anyone else there. Ethan glanced down at the black card still resting on the marble table behind him. Unlimited money, unlimited access, unlimited power. Yet somehow the woman serving water had become the only person in the room who could make him feel small. Then Naomi quietly added something that hit even harder. "You know what the strange part is?" Ethan looked at her carefully. "What?" Naomi met his eyes directly. "I almost accepted your offer, until I saw what your company did to people." The air around the rooftop table changed the moment Naomi spoke those words. Ethan stared at her carefully. "What exactly did my company do to people?" Naomi looked down briefly before answering. "It taught them that money matters more than being human." A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others raised their phones even higher. Nobody on that rooftop had ever heard someone speak to Ethan Callaway that way and survive the conversation. But Naomi did not sound angry. That was what unsettled him most. She sounded disappointed. Ethan crossed his arms slowly. "You rejected a six-figure future because of that." Naomi nodded once. "During the final interview, one of your executives told me something." Her eyes met his directly again. "He said empathy was a weakness in high finance." Ethan's expression hardened slightly. "Who said that?" "Does it matter?" she asked quietly. Silence spread across the rooftop again. Somewhere below them, traffic moved through Manhattan like rivers of white and red light. Expensive music still played softly through hidden speakers, but nobody was paying attention anymore. Every person there was watching a billionaire lose control of a conversation for the first time in years. Ethan stepped closer. "You think you understand how my world works because of one interview?" Naomi shook her head calmly. "No, I understand because I watched what it did to my mother." Ethan frowned. Naomi continued before he could interrupt. "She worked for a hedge fund in Chicago for 14 years. 80-hour weeks. Missed birthdays. Missed holidays. She gave everything to people who replaced her 2 days after she got sick." The words landed heavily. "When she died," Naomi said softly, "the company sent a fruit basket." Nobody laughed this time. Even the influencers standing nearby suddenly looked ashamed of themselves. Ethan felt something unfamiliar pressing against his chest. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Guilt. Real guilt. Daniel leaned toward him carefully. "Sir, social media is exploding right now." Ethan barely heard him. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi. "So instead of taking the job," he said slowly, "you chose this." Naomi glanced around the rooftop restaurant. "This job lets me go home knowing I did not become someone I hate." Ethan looked around at the luxury surrounding him. $1,000 dinners. Diamond watches. Investors laughing too loudly at fake jokes. And for the first time in a very long time, he suddenly saw it the way she did. Hollow. Then Naomi quietly reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded hospital receipt. She placed it gently onto the marble table beside the final black card. "Lily's surgery deadline is tomorrow morning," she said. "So if tonight is really about discovering who people are." Her eyes moved from Ethan to the wealthy crowd behind him. "Now everybody here has a choice." Naomi's words hung over the rooftop like thunder waiting to break. Nobody moved. Nobody even touched their drinks anymore. The folded hospital bill sat beside the black credit card under the soft gold candlelight, and somehow that single sheet of paper carried more weight than every diamond watch in the room combined. Ethan looked around slowly. Moments earlier, These people had been laughing about private jets and luxury cars. Now most of them could not even look at the hospital receipt. The billionaire picked it up carefully. $87,000. Due by 9 o'clock the next morning. For Ethan Callaway, it was less than the price of the watch on his wrist. Yet for someone else, it was the line between hope and heartbreak. Interesting. A man near the bar suddenly muttered with an uncomfortable laugh. Everybody acts emotional until it is time to spend their own money. A few nervous chuckles followed, but they sounded weak now. Empty. Naomi quietly shook her head. That is the problem, she said softly. People think kindness only matters when it is convenient. Ethan looked at her sharply. Something inside him kept shifting every time she spoke. She was not trying to embarrass anyone. She was simply telling the truth, and truth sounded dangerous in rooms built on appearances. Then something unexpected happened. The influencer who had chosen the Lamborghini slowly reached into her purse and placed her black card back onto the marble table. I do not need the car, she said quietly. The rooftop fell silent again. Seconds later, the woman who wanted the Miami penthouse removed her card too. Neither do I. Ethan stared at them both in surprise. Even Daniel looked shocked. The travel blogger hesitated the longest. Then she exhaled deeply and pushed her card forward as well. Use mine too. Naomi blinked, clearly caught off guard. Ethan looked around the rooftop and realized the atmosphere had completely changed. Nobody cared about luxury anymore. Not after hearing Naomi speak. Not after seeing what real sacrifice looked like standing beside them wearing a waitress uniform. Ethan slowly loosened his tie for the first time all night. Suddenly the rooftop felt too small, too loud, too fake. Daniel, he said quietly, pay the hospital immediately. Naomi looked up fast. Ethan continued before she could speak. Not the bill. His eyes stayed locked on hers. The entire treatment plan. Gasps spread across the rooftop. Several phones nearly dropped onto tables. But Ethan was not finished. And create a trust fund for Lily's education. Naomi opened her mouth slightly, stunned for the first time that night. Ethan stared at the black card in his own hand before setting it down beside the others. Congratulations, he said quietly. You just ruined the game. Then he looked directly at Naomi Brooks and admitted something nobody expected a billionaire to say out loud. I think you might be the first person here who actually made me ashamed of myself. The rooftop remained completely silent after Ethan admitted the truth out loud. The most powerful man in the room had just confessed shame in front of hundreds of strangers, and nobody knew how to react to it. Naomi looked at him carefully, almost like she was trying to decide whether he actually meant it. Ethan exhaled slowly and loosened his tie another inch. Do you know what the strange part is? He asked quietly. Naomi said nothing. Ethan glanced around the rooftop filled with wealthy investors, celebrities, and influencers who suddenly looked much smaller than they had an hour ago. I built my entire career believing people were motivated by greed, he admitted. Tonight, every person here proved me right. His eyes shifted back to Naomi. Except you. Somewhere near the bar, a phone notification echoed loudly through the silence. Then another, and another. Daniel looked down at his screen with growing concern. Sir, he said carefully, the videos from tonight are everywhere now. Ethan barely reacted. How bad? Daniel hesitated. People are calling it the moment a billionaire got humbled by a waitress. Several guests lowered their eyes immediately. Others quietly slipped their phones into their pockets, suddenly embarrassed they had spent the night recording instead of helping. Naomi slowly picked up the hospital receipt from the table. I did not ask for any of this, she said softly. Ethan nodded once. I know. Then why did you do it? She asked. The cards. The test. All of it. Ethan looked out toward the skyline for several long seconds before answering. Because after a while, money makes everything feel fake. Naomi stayed quiet. Ethan gave a hollow laugh under his breath. People smile differently around billionaires. They laugh harder, agree faster, lie easier. His voice lowered. I stopped believing sincerity even existed. Naomi studied him carefully now, not with admiration, not with fear, just understanding. Somehow that hurt more. And tonight, she asked quietly. Ethan looked directly at her. Tonight, I realized I built a room full of people trying to impress me, while the only honest person here was carrying a serving tray. The words hit the rooftop harder than any speech could have. Even the influencers who arrived chasing attention now looked emotionally exposed under the Manhattan lights. Then Naomi did something nobody expected. She pushed the final black card back toward Ethan. "Keep it," she said softly. Ethan frowned immediately. "Why?" Naomi gave a tired smile. "Because if kindness only happens after cameras start recording, then it is still a performance." Daniel looked stunned. Several people around them exchanged uncomfortable glances. But Ethan did not get angry. He just stared at the card sitting between them like it suddenly represented everything wrong with his world. Then Naomi picked up her tray again and quietly added one final sentence before turning away. "The real test was never about money, Ethan." She paused briefly near the edge of the rooftop lights. "It was about who people become when they think nobody important is watching." Naomi disappeared back into the flow of the restaurant before Ethan could answer her. The rooftop crowd remained frozen under the city lights, still processing what had just happened. Nobody cared about the black cards anymore. Nobody cared about luxury. The entire night had turned into something else entirely. Ethan slowly sat back down at the marble table, but for the first time in years, the chair did not feel powerful. It felt heavy. Across the rooftop, people whispered quietly while checking their phones. Videos from the night were spreading across social media faster than anyone expected. Headlines were already appearing. Billionaire CEO humiliated by Waitress. The woman who rejected unlimited money. The real richest person in Manhattan tonight. Daniel looked down at his screen nervously. "Sir," he said carefully, "your investors are calling." Ethan did not even reach for his phone. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi moving between tables in the distance. She looked exactly the same as before. Same black uniform. Same calm expression. Same quiet professionalism. That unsettled him more than anything else. Most people changed the second they gained attention. Naomi somehow became even quieter. Then one of Ethan's business partners approached the table with an uncomfortable smile. "You should probably control this narrative quickly," the man whispered. "People online are turning her into some kind of hero." Ethan looked up slowly. "Maybe because she is one." The man blinked in surprise. Ethan stood again before anyone could respond. He walked across the rooftop one more time, but this time people moved out of his way silently. Not because he was rich, because they sensed something changing inside him. Naomi was placing fresh silverware onto an empty table when Ethan stopped beside her. "I spent years believing success meant winning," he said quietly. Naomi kept arranging the table. "And now?" she asked softly. Ethan looked around the rooftop filled with expensive people, suddenly afraid to look shallow. "Now I think I built an entire life around being admired by strangers." Naomi paused briefly. "That sounds lonely." The honesty in her voice nearly broke him. Ethan gave a small laugh, filled with exhaustion instead of arrogance. "You know what hurts the most?" Naomi looked at him calmly. "What?" Ethan stared toward the skyline. "I could buy almost anything in this city tonight." His voice lowered. "But I do not think I could buy the kind of peace you have." Naomi looked at him for several long seconds before answering. "Peace comes from knowing who you are before the world tells you what you should become." Ethan absorbed every word carefully, like someone hearing truth for the first time in years. Then Daniel suddenly rushed toward them again, breathing hard. "Sir," he said urgently, "you need to see this immediately." Ethan frowned. "What happened?" Daniel turned the phone screen toward him. A new video had just surfaced online. Security footage from inside Callaway Capital 2 years earlier. And standing inside that video was Naomi Brooks. The rooftop crowd gathered around Daniel's phone as the security footage played under the glow of Manhattan lights. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. 2 years earlier, Naomi Brooks stood inside the lobby of Callaway Capital wearing a navy blue blazer instead of a waitress uniform. Her posture was confident, calm, brilliant. The timestamp showed the exact day of her final interview. Then another figure appeared in the video. Richard Vail, one of Ethan's senior executives. The audio was grainy, but clear enough. "If you want to survive in this industry," Richard told her coldly, "stop thinking emotionally. Compassion is expensive." Naomi stood silent for a moment before answering something that made the entire rooftop freeze all over again. "No," she said in the recording. "Losing compassion is expensive. People just pay for it later." Ethan slowly lowered the phone. Nobody spoke. The woman they mocked all night had predicted everything years ago. Richard laughed in the old footage. "You are too soft for this company." Naomi gave him one final look before walking away from the building forever. Back on the rooftop, Ethan felt sick to his stomach. Because he recognized the younger version of himself inside that company culture. He built it, encouraged it, rewarded it, all while believing success mattered more than humanity. Naomi quietly stepped beside him. "I never expected you to see that video," she said softly. Ethan looked at her carefully. "Why did you never expose it?" Naomi shrugged lightly. "Because angry people want revenge. Healed people just move forward." The answer hit harder than any accusation could have. Around them, guests who once admired Ethan now watched Naomi with something completely different. Respect. Real respect. Ethan turned toward the crowd slowly. "Tonight started as a game," he admitted. "A stupid one." Nobody interrupted him. "I thought money gave me the power to understand people." His voice lowered. But all it really did was hide how disconnected I had become. The rooftop stayed completely silent except for the distant sounds of New York traffic below them. Then Ethan reached for the final black card one last time. He looked at it for several seconds before snapping it cleanly in half. Gasps spread across the rooftop instantly. Ethan dropped the broken pieces onto the marble table beside the untouched champagne glasses. "I spent years testing people," he said quietly. "Tonight, I failed my own test." Naomi looked at him for a long moment before giving the smallest smile of the entire night. Not impressed, not victorious, just peaceful. Then she picked up her serving tray again because another table needed water refills. And somehow that simple act humbled Ethan more than anything else had. The billionaire who owned skyscrapers, private jets, and companies watched silently as the black waitress walked back into the crowd without asking for attention, praise, or reward. Because in the end, she did not change the room by becoming powerful. She changed it by refusing to lose her humanity in a world that rewarded people for doing exactly that.